And then I go to, I have a PowerPoint that I always go to just so you have a visual. And okay, so I thought the first thing on the menu, just to comment a little bit on the Silk Roads. I don't know, Carol, did you have a chance to look at the video?
No, I didn't. I was supposed to do it this morning, but then I got absorbed in watching the January 6th. So I'm looking forward to watching it.
Well, okay. I think I'll just I just had some random comments. I think we can save that. I sent around something. This I think will be fairly quick. There's been a nice discussion, and Harold's been part of it, and it included Bob Kelso about American democracy, and the question is it flawed? And I found a pretty good article. I just wanted to add to the discussion. Which the Economist Intelligence Unit officially labeled us as a flawed democracy. And there are 25 other countries in the world that are better democracies than we are, including Great Britain, the mother company, the country that we revolted against because they were too autocratic. The University of Würzburg rates America even lower with their measure, number 36. And Freedom House still considers the United States a free country, but using their measures, 60 other countries and territories are freer still. Bob Oxenberg, he's been part of this discussion on the flawed American democracy. So I was just summarizing, Bob, the last article I sent around, and this is just how outside evaluators have measured democracy by various indices and confirmed that we are getting worse. I thought one of the interesting things in that article was this group data on the world, and it's a global problem. So the countries that are getting more autocratic are in the dark color here, and you can see over the last 30 years they're climbing up, and then the countries that are in the process of becoming more democratic are on the down curve. Now, a lot of countries haven't changed at all. And this map kind of reflects that. Gray is they haven't changed, but you can see, and here the color code has switched unhelpfully. You can see America is among the countries that are becoming more autocratic. And the darker the color, the worse the process is. So Brazil has become more autocratic quicker than we are. Turkey, in India, of course, with Modi is a good example. And those that are democratizing more. I'm not, what country is this? I'm not sure what country that is.
That's Mali.
Chad.
It's Mali.
Mali?
Well, that's interesting because The Economist gave Mali the Country of the Year award 2 years ago. And then,
You know what? I think you might be right about Chad. I think Mali's to the left. I should know. I've been to Mali.
well, so Mali got the Economist Award for Country of the Year, the one that had showed the most promise. That was 2 years ago. And then reading the newspaper in the last 2 years, it's like almost every week something terrible has happened in Mali, something very undemocratic. It's interesting. Madagascar's going up. And I guess I've got something to see. What's this?
That's I think that's Myanmar. It's hard to believe.
No, that can't. Oh, this must be reflecting a year. This data must be a year ago, because that would have been true with Aung San Suu Kyi regaining power, at least what, 10 years ago, 5. But they've certainly backslid. So that's that. Yeah. So a lot of this is dated in any case.
Sure it is.
Did anybody have anything to say about the Ukraine? I just reviewed Timothy Snyder. He's been kind of our go-to guy as we went through the history of the Ukraine. He's very good at that. And he's had a recent interview. So there's been some changes in the Ukraine. We spent, I think, 5 or 6 hours on the Ukraine. I don't follow the day-to-day news very closely, so you all can educate me if you have something to say. Well, that failing, now I can go on.
Okay, I'll say something. I don't necessarily agree with what Ramsey said the other night, that the Russians are going to win. It really depends on what you define as win. I mean, they can declare victory if they want at any time.
Yeah, and the thing that I think we were heartened by, and Carol is the one that discovered Timothy Snyder for us, is he's very optimistic long term. And he's also been, in an interview last month, optimistic about this summer. His position was that if Putin didn't declare victory and get out in a certain window, that meant he was either going to stay and fight and try to gain more territory, which Timothy Snyder just does not believe he can do. Looking at both the state of the Ukrainian military and the problem that the Russians are having with manpower, drafting, getting people to volunteer. Their inducement now is 3 times the average salary of a Russian. So if the United States Army was drafting now, they'd be offering a soldier a $230,000 a year job. So that's how desperate they are.
Surely isn't that the fundamental definition of a mercenary?
Yes.
On many levels.
Well, man,
they're mercenaries that he's recruiting. Yeah.
Well,
he's already got a bunch of those, the Wagner Brigade or whatever.
Yeah, we covered. Yeah, we covered the Wagner and their mischief all around the world.
Yeah, they're in Mali, of course, as well.
Yeah, yeah. So
So I think that Russia doesn't win if, for example, Poland becomes more democratic instead of being almost in pitch black on that map. Or if it's unlikely, but even if Hungary becomes maybe more, I mean, if Putin can't spread autocracy around Eastern Europe, then he hasn't really won, has he? I mean, he may grab the Donbass and so on, but is that a win?
no, and he's guaranteed that Sweden and Finland are joining NATO, and even Ukrainians that were Russian speaking and slightly sympathetic at one point are totally turned off by Russian atrocities and heavy-handedness. So I mean, he's his own worst enemy. So, Timothy Snyder's very clear about this. Timothy Snyder has lived in the Ukraine and specialized in the Ukraine, and he's written books on tyranny based on Eastern Europe. And he's a great student of both world wars. And he's written a book called On Tyranny, which is basically about Eastern Europe. So, all right.
Oh, Johnny, you know, I heard on television that Iran is sending drones and arms to Russia. How is that going to change the scenario?
Wow, that's interesting, huh? I don't know, Harold, Bob, can you got any theories on that? Why would they do that?
Well, they're in bed with the Russians economically, but they're both autocracies. I saw something about that in the paper today, that our spy system has sniffed out that that's going to happen. It hasn't quite happened yet, but they're the same spy system that said that Putin was going to go to war with Ukraine 6 months before he did. So maybe they know what they're doing.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I know Iran's snuggling up to the Chinese as well. So now you've got that trio to contend with. Huh. Okay. It is interesting now that what's the abbreviated name? The new alliance between India, Japan, Australia, United States, whereby Australia gets nuclear submarines. There's a fancy nickname for that, but they've become even stronger in the face of Russia recruiting China. Now China is just seen firmly in the camp and is no longer as attractive as it was for anything. So anyway, may you live in interesting times. I mean, before Putin invaded the Ukraine, I was pretty much resigned to dying without knowing what was going to happen with autocracy. But Putin has put it on the fast track, and it's a tragedy for the world. But I might get a glimpse of what might happen in the future. Dark way of looking at it. So I do have one other go-to thing in case we run out, but I think the intention of this was always to make this more a discussion group. For those of you that were either there at Ramsey's presentation or watched it on video. Is it any comments you want to make about Silk Roads? Okay, well, I'll go on to my well, I don't know what you're going to call it. You're gonna call me a reactionary probably by the end, but this is my favorite childhood story, Brer Rabbit. All right. Now, how can I possibly make this culturally relevant? It's about the cancellation generation. That's what I'm basically protesting, at least this example. So I was born in 1941. This came out in 1945. Brer Rabbit, Brer Fox, The Song of the South, Uncle Remus. And with Uncle Remus, you got Zippity Doo-Dah. This is me. I was a sickly kid. So this comes into it. I had a lot of problems. And you probably can't see, but I was cross-eyed. And I was seeing double, and I was destined to, have amblyopia and possibly blindness in one eye. There I am with glasses, but it was a hard road to correct that, and I had to have surgery. And my eyes were bandaged post-op for 2 weeks. And the whole 2 weeks, all I did was then listen to the soundtrack of Song of the South. So I know almost every line from the movie. I carried it forward. Uncle Remus was my hero, a wise grandfather figure, which I didn't have at that time. I only had one grandfather, and he was remote and distant. And he adds talking animals, which was invented by Aesop, right? This is a great tradition. And there was an ongoing dialogue between Brer Rabbit and Uncle Remus, which was so entertaining for a kid who was not able to see anything. And once I could go to the movie, it just turbocharged my love for it. This moment in the movie where Uncle Remus in Technicolor, live action humans, is walking, and all of a sudden he's in a cartoon. That was very advanced for that. And I certainly agree with this critic who says it's one of the most magical transformations in all of cinema. For sure, in the 1940s, it was. You were going to get other moments, and now live action Disney stuff is de rigueur. But then it blew my mind. And Zippity Doo-Dah won the Best Song Academy Award in 1946. More about that in a second. Aiko, you can't see this now because you're on audio, but it's a picture of you at your 70th birthday, and you were entertained by your husband, your son, and your grandson, who sang Zippity Doo-Dah. James, this is a story I need to stop and tell. This is one of the things when you dig deep in history, you find personal resonance. It's not hard. The guy that played Uncle Remus is James Baskett. I grew up in Indianapolis during my formative years, and James Baskett was from Indianapolis. He went to the high school next to Ours, it was all mostly Black. And he got an Oscar, but not at the Oscars. This was a special award ceremony where he got an honorary Oscar because he wasn't even nominated, which was now that makes me really mad. I mean, he could have gotten Best Supporting Actor to Brer Rabbit if you want, but geez. And this was institutional racism for sure. And Baskett was prohibited from attending the premiere in Atlanta, Georgia, because it was a segregated event. But remember, he sang the Academy Award-winning song, James Baskett. Now, unfortunately, he had bad diabetes. We didn't control it well in those days, and he died of heart failure the next year. So a tragic life cut short, but Black history remembers him, and he's honored in that community. So I've got some allies that honored James Baskett and Uncle Remus, even though he's been erased by Disney. I'll get to that. This is interesting. Just a personal story for me. If you know the movie, there are talking butterflies. And Baskett saw an ad asking for people who wanted to audition to be talking butterflies. So he went. He had a strong theatrical experience in Indianapolis in the African-American community. But Walt Disney happened to come by while he was auditioning to be a butterfly, and said, "Hey, that guy's my Uncle Remus." He was also the voice of Brer Fox, which is probably only interesting to somebody like me. He was the first actor to be hired by Walt Disney for any role in a film that was live action. So this was new territory for Disney too. And his vocal talent wasn't just for butterflies and Uncle Remus and Brer Fox. The guy playing Brer Rabbit was called away. He had a USO commitment, and he said, "Oh, I can do Brer Rabbit too." His name was Johnny Lee. And another sort of point of resonance for me. And he was the first Black actor to take on a non-comic role. In those days, you had characters like Stepin Fetchit, Rochester, in the Jack Benny radio show. And he had some experience already in another one of my favorite Disneys, Dumbo. He played Fats Crow, the voice of Fats Crow. James Baskett did. He also was more controversially on the Amos and Andy show, where you had white guys playing Amos and Andy, but he was a regular feature on the show as a lawyer, Gabby Gibson. And I remember Amos and Andy on the radio. But of course, the big thing was Song of the South. And for a long time, it was one of the prides of Disney, as you'll see. But in 1986, to my horror, Disney was criticized for making stereotypes of Black Americans and idealizing the social conditions of the South. And I said, come on, I really, Uncle Remus's cabin was clearly not an idealized place. Disney came up with the right words. Oh, it's no longer appropriate. It's out of date. Other people piled on, and they probably got motivated Disney to cancel it. One of the critiques was, hey, this African-American dialect was exaggerated by white writers. I'll take that on in just a second. The myth of the happy slave. Well, it's not like there was no plantation that treated African-Americans well. I mean, they were in sin, they had slaves, but you just read Uncle Tom's Cabin and you know that the plantation that Tom loved was in Kentucky, where my parents are from. The tragedy of Uncle Tom is he gets sold literally down the river to Louisiana and Simon Legree. And then they say, what other criticize the movie for omitting atrocities. But come on, it's a movie for children. Disney then has tied itself in pretzels. They had at Disney World a Brer Rabbit statue that they had put up probably sometime in the 50s or 60s, celebrating, as they should, Brer Rabbit, whose legacy lives on in such characters as Bugs Bunny and the plots of constantly a wolf constantly being outfoxed, if you will, as the Roadrunner, right? It's built on the same shtick as Brer Rabbit and Brer Fox. So it was removed from its pedestal. There's Disney World. There's no replacement. And interesting, Splash Mountain has a ride. I don't know what happened to the rest of this slide. I trust that there's a new feature on PowerPoint where they'll design your slides for you. But on Splash Mountain, it's a ride in two of the theme parks, and they reenact the story of the Laughing Place, which is a real gem of a story. And it opened in the late 1980s, just at the very time that they're removing the movie from circulation. And it's kind of strange. The kids going into Splash Mountain, they know about Mickey and Goofy, but who's Brer Rabbit and Brer Fox? They have no idea because Disney has withdrawn the films. And then this critic says, oh, they were withdrawn because they're based on minstrel archetypes. That is wrong, and I'll prove it to you in just a second. Also, but this is correct. Missing from the Splash Mountain ride are the African-American characters of Uncle Remus and Aunt Tempe, who was, by the way, was played by Hattie McDaniel, who got an Oscar for Gone with the Wind. And then all during the ride, all you hear is zippity doo-dah, just, you know, the kind of thing that they'll do just over and over in a theme park ride. And everybody recognized that. So Disney is really giving out mixed messages. It wants to have it both ways. It shows how proud they are of what they created, but they hide the whole story. Of course, I'm outraged, and I read sections where comment sections, and these are just a few of the phrases from comment sections that I identified with. There are positive lessons to be learned. There's nothing to be ashamed of. History happened, which I find myself saying over and over again as we cancel history and pull down statues of Abraham Lincoln. And the rest of the world is able to see this movie. Disney has not pulled it from Europe and Asia. And that there's something about this culture that has become intimidating. And I'm using this example in particular. And this person wished they had a granddad that could tell stories like that. I've already said that was me too. And children see with their heart and their little world, and they know when kindness is being shown and that it's a movie. This guy's a little bit more direct in his objection. The story imparts a lot of lessons. And the fact that it is being delivered by an African-American to a white kid who has not been given those lessons. His father, to his credit in the movie, is a Southern journalist who is trying to advocate against going to war. And always when I research any of these things, I find more stuff I've got to do to understand it. And so I stumbled on this podcast, 6 hours going through the Song of the South. It's called You Must Remember This, which of course is the title of a song from Casablanca. Play it again, Sam. And so I'm going to be listening to this just to stoke my anger even more, I suppose. And so this is my defense. And my defense is supported by the likes of Harvard scholars. And they're writing a book, African-American Folktales for the Next Generation. These stories are based on African-American folktales. And here's a familiar face we see from his Roots TV show and many other venues. I think he was the guy, the professor that got arrested trying to get into his own house. And Obama famously invited him and the arresting cop for a beer at the White House, which I thought was a great idea, but of course the Republicans found a way to mock it. But before Disney did it, it's a long tradition of having these stories, and they're based on stories collected by Joel Chandler Harris. He didn't write the stories. He didn't make up the stories. I'm going to tell you how he got the stories. So this is a fine tradition. And just because Disney did it doesn't mean it should be canceled. This is the guy who in my mind is also a hero. He was, you can see from his red hair, he was Irish, and people made fun of him in the South for being Irish, for having red hair. He was illegitimate. And so he identifies with African Americans who are also certainly more downtrodden than he is. He's born in 1948, so he's going to live through the Civil War in his teenage years. And after the war, he emerged as a writer who supported Reconstruction, who supported a New South. So he was an enlightened Southerner. And the idea that his story should be canceled is, I don't know. So we traveled to Atlanta, and of course, we researched Joel Chandler Harris, and bingo, he had a house that he could build because he was a successful writer. He did make money as a journalist, which is hard to do these days, and an author. And it was called The Wren's Nest. And we looked it up, and it's not open every day because nobody knows about Song of the South, and nobody knows about Chandler Harris. But so they open it on Saturdays. And so Iko and I said, we're in. And off we went for an appointed tour. We were the only ones. And we approached the house, and somebody had put a welcoming flower out for us. This is Joel Chandler Harris on the porch of the Wren's Nest, the home. And this was our guide. Against expectations, she was a Buddhist. So we talked about Nichiren Buddhism, which was her sect. She knew all the Brer Rabbit stories. She confirmed it was based on African folk tales, and confirmed that Joel Chandler Harris had been told these stories by a slave. And this is the possible model for Uncle Remus. This is on display in the home. And he spent hundreds of hours in slave quarters. He got a job as a teenager as a typesetter. Nobody knows what a typesetter is, but Harold does. And Bob, you probably don't. You're probably too young, but you in my elementary school, you had to take shop, and you had to learn how to set type. So he was a typesetter for a regional newspaper that was centered and set on a plantation, an enlightened plantation, like the plantation in the movie Song of the South. And so he, as I said earlier, he had a humble background too, and identified with the plight of the slaves, and he had this intimate connection. So he collected stories. He didn't make them up, and he certainly earned the right to pass the stories that he collected forward.
Bob's talking about the Song of the South.
So here he is with another one of my heroes, James Whitcomb Riley. So you probably don't know, if you're not from Indiana, you don't know who James Whitcomb Riley is. But we had, as growing up, we had to study James Whitcomb Riley and learn his poems. And what did Riley do? He mastered Hoosier folks lingo, just like Chandler learned the patois of the African American oral tradition. So no different. And so those people that say that Joel Chandler Harris or the Disney writers were belittling the tradition of African American community have it exactly wrong. And Joel Chandler Harris was famous enough to hobnob with president. Here he is with Teddy Roosevelt. They had a postage stamp dedicated to him in 1948, no doubt because of the popularity of Song of the South. And so we traveled around with our guide, the whole house, got the background, got Joel Chandler Harris's biography. Here she is with Iko and with me. And we could have had her for another couple of hours. She was there for the duration, God bless her. And the whole staff at Wren's Nest are African American. And it's set now, surrounded pretty much by I'd say lower middle class African American homes. The one story that particularly invites controversy is the Tar Baby story. And I guess it's because Tar is Black. And it's interesting to me that Toni Morrison wrote a novel called Tar Baby. And here is the Tar Baby in the movie. And here's Toni Morrison getting the Presidential Medal of Honor, but of course she'd already had the Nobel Prize. And here's what she says about here's what she said about the Tar Baby. She learned the story from her family and owed no debt to anybody else. She wasn't gonna say that she got the idea from Disney because it existed before Disney. The legacy of Brer Rabbit, the Connivers are always outsmarted. Brer Rabbit always outfoxes Brer Fox. And Ralph Ellison, no less, was positive about Joel Chandler Harris's work. And he compared him to Aesop and comedy as a tool for delivering philosophy through the back door, and using animals and their instincts, and noting that we may have the same instincts below. Interestingly enough, there is Aesop fables, particularly the rooster and the fox, and the fox gets outsmarted. So other examples of canceling is recontextualizing, Gone with the Wind, whatever that is. And any TV episode that did blackface, which occurred certainly in 30 Rock as mocking doing blackface, probably showing it's a bad idea, but just any depiction of it. So that's the end of my rant. I'll stop sharing that. And thank you for your indulgence. Unless if there's any comments, I'd welcome those. Any questions, I'd welcome those. Anything else we want to do with the remainder of the hour?
John, as Harold, I remember one of my favorite sayings was, "Please don't throw me in the briar patch."
Exactly.
Please don't throw me in the briar patch.
It's the best example. And later on, when you're taking your courses in psychology, there's a unit on paradoxical intent. And I have an example of paradoxical intent. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I'm wondering if our library system has canceled Joel Chandler Harris, or if the books are still within the library system. That might be something to follow up.
Yeah, when Disney pulled, it's in the 80s when they pulled it from circulation. So I investigated the only place that I could get a copy, because I had grandkids. I wanted to show my what influenced me. Was a laser disc from Japan. So I had to borrow a neighbor's laser disc player, and now it's available because Disney hasn't pulled it from international markets, so you can buy it. And now I've got the DVDs, but I'll never be able to show it streaming. So that's sad.
Yeah, cancel culture has gone way too far.
Way too far. So this
What
is
do you think? Well, let me ask you this, because I'm not nearly as familiar, for obvious reasons, really, because I've only been in the States for 40 years, and it's probably was beginning to be removed as I got here from the lexicon. But surely the Disney company will have taken some professional advice from leaders in African-American history and culture. I mean, are we assuming it was just a bunch of a bunch of white men suits at Disney that made the decision without any context?
Yeah. I think that they were probably more scared of the activists, not that they didn't go to the academics. They listened to the activists. Like the mindset in the 80s, Harold, take us back. What were we thinking? We'd had the successful civil rights of Lyndon Johnson and the backpedaling with the Southern strategy with Richard Nixon. Carter, of course, had excellent relations with the African-American community. If you go to his presidential library in Atlanta, right near right next to the CDC, because Carter did a lot of medical work. His mission was to eradicate the guinea worm. And I don't know if you saw this. You all know that he had a malignant melanoma with metastasis in his brain. And then they discovered one of these miracle bullets, biologic, that targeted specifically the genome of that particular form of malignant melanoma, and it wiped out the metastasis in his brain. So why is that relevant? He was on the TV show. He was being interviewed by Judy Woodward, and he came on and he said, "My goal now is to outlive the last guinea worm." So he got total war against the guinea worm, yeah. So he had great relations. And by the way, there's a wonderful movie called The Rock and Roll President, Jimmy Carter, and it shows his relationship to the music community, in particular African Americans. So he was certainly one exception. But then Reagan came, and I'm trying to think of how the civil rights activists reacted to Reagan. I'm not coming up with any specific memory.
Well, they didn't like him.
Oh, yeah, that's for sure.
Well, I just looked up on Kindle Brer Rabbit and the Tar Baby.
Yeah.
And I can buy it for $1. It's only 10 pages long. And the description is kind of interesting. It might appeal to you. So the description goes, it'll take 1 minute to read.
Okay.
The original tale of Brer Rabbit and the Tar Baby appeared in the Cherokee Advocate in 1845. but a number of similar Cherokee and African slave stories involving a rabbit trickster appeared around the same time. In this story, which is filled with fairly heavy dialect, the author tells how Brer Rabbit uses his wits to convince his enemies, Fox and Wolf, to cast him into a patch of briars rather than to get even with him using a more conventional and more successful method. Only when the deed has been done do Fox and Wolf realize they have been tricked. Final paragraph. The author, Joel Chandler Harris, 1845, that's a different birth date actually to the one you showed, to 1908, started collecting materials for a series of books featuring the character of Brer Rabbit in the 1870s. Mr. Harris had become familiar with many of the stories he wrote down during the time he worked as a printer's devil for a newspaper run by Joseph Turnwald, who also owned a plantation using slave labor. So that's a probably authentic bit of history there. To give you the background to acquiring the book on Kindle or to buy. I'm thinking that this is just devil's advocate. I'm thinking it's easy to find the story. I haven't checked Contra Costa libraries to see if you can borrow it from the library. I haven't checked local middle school or high school libraries, obviously, in the last 10 minutes. But I'm wondering if, in fact, the issue is that Disney, being as large and influential as it is, when it made possibly commercial decision to say this is not good for business, to promote this movie that we made, they didn't necessarily cancel it. It just made it a lot less visible.
They took down the statue.
Well, that's in a, yeah. That's on Disney property. Well, it was Disney property. Didn't
Yes, that's right.
Didn't the Florida legislature just take it off Disney? I don't know.
No. What they did was they eliminated their tax break.
Oh, they eliminated the tax advantages of a particular, I guess you'd say, political entity.
It sounds like it was equivalent to what a special district is in California.
It's a special district, exactly.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's a bit of a digression. So no, I take your point. But in the end, Disney's it's in business to make money for its shareholders. So yeah, we can criticize them, and it's unfortunate that this wonderful bit of American cultural history suffers. I mean, it's certainly, from my perspective, it suffered because you've just taught me about 1,000 times more than I ever knew on the subject of this guy, Joel Chandler Harris. And I'm really tempted, but I will. I'll be doing a bit of Googling today. So thank you for that. But Disney's a private company. They have to make, unfortunately, I suppose, what they think are good business decisions.
Yeah.
Well, I'm interested though in the African American community now. James Baskett is a hero, and I'm wondering if there, and I may lead it, a boomerang movement against Disney for discriminating against the African American community and one of their heroes. Get James Baskett out there. He got an honorary Oscar. Nobody knows why. Nobody knows who's singing Zippity Doo-Dah. This is an outrage, I tell you.
You could probably get some of the conservative African Americans on board with you. I mean, John McWhorter and Glenn Lowry and those guys. I mean,
that's a good idea. Yeah, that's really a good idea. I'm going to run. My oldest son is in journalism, and he's been the object of cancellation, and he's very sympathetic with Glenn Lowry. So, and he may even have an in with them. My God, that's a great idea, Harold. That's a great idea. I love it.
Everybody tends to think of blacks as being monolithic as far as, you know, what they look like, what they act like, what they think like, then it's total BS. You know,
Yeah,
if you knew them personally, they'd be the first ones to tell you that. But yet
Yeah.
the press treats them that way, and
Yeah.
more than a few white people treat them that way.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, by God, they should, and that Splash Mountain thing, get Remus in there, get Tempe in there. Where are and they're in the story that Chandler originally wrote. And how can you eliminate African American characters that are the source of which come from African American folktales? I mean, come on.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Thank you all for your contribution. Thanks for looking that up real time and adding. You know, you're on tape now. You're on this. You're a co-conspirator. Your caveat at the end about Disney just trying to earn money for their shareholders, that'll probably get you off the hook.
It's probably the reality.
Yeah.
Like when somebody threatens to sue you, you don't go to court, you just pay them off to go away.
All right. Thank you so much. It was really, really
Thanks, Bob.
fascinating.
Thank
As
you.
always, John.
Okay, well, we're going to get started on California at some point, so we'll see. All right.
Yeah, that'll be fun too.
Thank
The Big
you.
Four.
What's that?
Carol, it was really good to have a little bit of diversion from the Ukraine and the politics and everything else. This is just a different version of politics, but
Yeah.
it has a good twist to it. I
Yeah,
love
yeah.
Brer Rabbit, so I'm with you.
Good for you. Good. You're a Brer Rabbit fan. Are you old enough?
I'm way old enough. Plus, I read everything all the time, especially kids' books. So, and I just looked at. It's not Brer Rabbit is not on the online. It might be in the Contra Costa Library, but it's not on the app that you can get online. So
Okay.
I think it'll be great to find out, Bob, if it's available. I bet it's been pulled from a lot of schools though, but maybe not the South.
Okay. Well, thank you. I'm glad I know somebody else who knows Brer Rabbit.
Yeah, I love
All right. You can be part of my conspiracy, Carol.
Bye.
Thank you, John.
All right. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye. Thank you for the tour, Aiko.
Yeah, see ya.
Okay, bye.
Oh, well, now that you're both here, I just got home and my recording was not very loud. I heard you and I was putting my phone to my ear, which was not exactly a very safe way of driving. But
Oh my gosh.
anyway, I got a bunch of things at the